Okay, so this is an image, and this is Don Schrempf's image, and it did not win anything. And just from a personal opinion standpoint, it's kind of an image that is interesting, and the photographer probably was very happy with it. But at the same time, a judge is not going to look at it and go, that's really different or interesting. So I'm just going to use it because I think it's perfectly fine the way it is, by the way, but I'm going to use it to demonstrate some techniques. So one of the things that if you don't know about it, you should, and it should be in your toolbox of things, is if you look over here in the tools, there's the sharpen tool, and this is a spot sharpening tool. It doesn't do the whole image. It gives you a little brush, and you can sharpen just parts that you want to sharpen. So in this, me looking at it, I just want to sharpen some of these leaves in the center part of this flower. It doesn't sharpen things that are blurry. If you look up here in the options, I have it in the normal mode, and the strength is 52%, and you could bump it up to 100%. It doesn't matter too much, but if you stay too long in one spot, I'll do it and then I'll reverse it. But if I stay too long in one spot, it'll start to deprecate the image. See how this is all goofy here? You don't want that. So I'm going to go back. But if you just use it at 50% or lower, whatever you feel comfortable with, it's all experimentation. And you just do a little bit of sharpening it. Oops, that's too much. Started to give me a little grain. So you have to be careful and evaluate what's working and what isn't. And by the way, you can stop me at any time to ask questions. And then I think what would help this image a little bit is these fine little leaves could use a little sharpening. So I'm going to give them a little sharpening. And what the effect that you see on the screen may not be that strong, but it helps the image in my humble estimation.
I have a question.
Yes, Chris.
Can you do the sharpening on say a new layer so that it's non-destructive, and you can?
You can, and actually, I forgot to do the one thing I always remember, and I wrote myself down here, is I always duplicate the layer, and I work on the duplicated layer, not the original layer.
Right.
So, and that's how I work non-destructively, by the way. And it's just simple duplication, and then you work it, and then you bring them back at the end. I'll go back and do a little bit of this. And of course, now I have to do all these guys, these petals in here again. But the real point of this exercise, not so much that I want to really change much in this photo, but that you should have this tool available to you at any time and make use of it. Here's a great use of it is for any portrait or photograph with people in it. I always take this and I will go, I make a little sign of the cross. I'll go across their eyes this way, and then down the bridge of their nose, and then across their mouth at the bottom. So I'll always do that to sharpen their face, not their cheeks, not their hairline, just their eyes, bridge of their nose, and their lips. And that just gives you a tiny bit of pop in portraits. Okay. I'm gonna make the brush a little bigger now. And by the way, the hardness makes a difference. You don't want it too hard because this is not a hard image. If it was a hard image, maybe you would have more things. You might have that percentage higher, but you don't, you want to keep it fairly low. So the things I'm going to sharpen here, you get a little more sharpness in these big leaves, the ones that are in focus anyway, and add a little bit to it. Now, the next tool I want to demonstrate is the image adjustments, replace color. And when you go and do this, you can click on any color in this image. So it gives you an eyedropper. And I'm going to put it right here in this kind of a middle purple zone. And then this is the fuzziness. I'm going to bring the fuzziness all the way up. And what fuzziness means is, think of it almost like, if you know what feathering is, fuzziness is very much like feathering. But in this case, it's looking at the color and it's finding the more fuzziness. So I'm at the maximum, the more of that color it's going to find in everything in that image. So light purples, dark purples, is going to find anything around that color. And then I'm going to take it and I'm simply going to change hue and saturation. And now my flower is pink instead of purple. And it's a very handy thing to do to adjust colors. You can do that with, if a person's wearing a shirt or a sweater and you want to see what that same thing would look like in orange, you do this same process. You click on the shirt. If they're wearing a blue shirt, you click on it, make the fuzziness pretty high, and then change the hue, and now you've got an orange shirt, a purple shirt, whatever color you want. And so that's my before and that's my after. And that's just with two simple tools to make some edits.
It does pop in that chartreuse color, whatever it is.
Yeah. But it's true to nature at the same time, right? They do exist in that color. So it's okay. You don't put this in a nature category though, Mercury.
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to show some different techniques. We'll get rid of this flower and we'll move over to Betty's image. And this is Mono Lake. And this is a very beautiful image. Excuse me. Just the way it is. But the judge's comments, what they were talking about was that they thought that the tufas, if I've got that term correct, the tufas are, it's too dark, you can't see enough detail, blah, blah, blah. That's where the commentary was. So the first thing I'm going to do is, if I wanted to isolate these tufas, I could try, I'll go over here to the quick selection tool. I could try to select subject and just see what that would do.
You could also do this in Lightroom also, correct?
You can to a more limited degree, but yes, you could do that in Lightroom as well. You could do select subject and make your adjustments there. So so it just took this main tufa, didn't do anything else. So because of that, I now need to take my selection tool and drag it around here so that I can start get the other pieces. And I'm even going to get some of the water here just because it's in the reflection. And if you want to go the opposite direction, takes things out, then you push the Alt or Option key and click in there, and it'll get rid of that.
Well, the reason I didn't make the tufa lighter is they're backlit and they're almost black in the original image.
Yeah,
And I
and
did light them enough that you could see some texture, but I didn't want it to be too bright because it would look phony.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. And I think the judge was a little off on that. But I'm going to follow what she said and we can talk about it. There is one thing that I think does come out from this that is interesting, since I played with this a little bit beforehand. And that is, we'll see that at the end. Okay, so that's all that. It selected those guys. I need to select, oh. And you notice I'm not creating a mask here. I am simply using the selection tools to do this. And I'm not going to bother to do this, but normally, like I said before, I would make a copy of it so that I can work non-destructively. So bear with me for a second and I'll get this all selected.
And these ones that are separate, Eric, you can do that still just with the add tool and then just minus the lake in between, or because they're not connected?
Yeah, so inside, if you look at the tool there, there's a
Mhm.
little plus sign in there, in here.
Yeah,
You may not be able to see it, so that it will automatically add to it, and that's selected up here up top.
okay,
If you select just the regular tool, it will not do that. It'll actually turn it off. But as long as I always leave the plus sign on. And then I use the Alt key if I want to, just like I have to do right now,
subtract, yeah.
if I want to subtract. All right, I think that's what I was looking for. Now I'm just going to use a couple of simple tools here. One is going to be image adjustments, brightness and contrast. So I'm just going to add some brightness to this because Betty's right. That's a late evening shot or early morning. Which was this, Betty?
Crack of dawn.
Crack of dawn. Okay, so I would not be awake for this one. But so I'm going to bring up some brightness. And then on the contrast, I don't want to look too phony, so I'm going to bring down the contrast actually. And whoops, bring down the contrast. And that might be a little too much brightness. Somewhere around there is what I'm going to look for brightness and contrast. And then what I'm going to do is in this selection, I can go to filter and I can go to sharpen. And under sharpen, if you've ever seen these tools, there's 5, but I would not use an occasion. There might be a special occasion to sharpen edges, but typically I'm not going to use any of these except unsharp mask. Unsharp mask, I don't want to use more than about 120, 150 at the maximum, because it becomes a little bit pixelated if you do too much sharpness. And the radius, you keep that very low, and threshold, I don't bother with that. And this tool has been in Photoshop since day one, I think. And I've never found a use for threshold, but who knows, there might be one. I'm gonna say okay. And then I'm going to click off of this, and I want to show you one of the weaknesses of doing this is that get up really close and we might have some halo. I'm just seeing if there is any. Well, it's not, it's really negligible. There's some tiny bit of halo right here, a little bit here maybe, but not much. We're pretty fortunate. And in that case, if you do have halo, you use the blur tool. And with the blur tool, which is behind the sharpen spot tool, you just blur it a little bit and it blends that with the background. And Matt Kolosky, or however we say his name.
Polkowski.
Okay, easy for you to say. But Matt K.
That's because I'm Polish also.
Okay. Well, Freedom, of course.
Freedom, yes, fine Polish name.
But Matt talks about this in his latest free video, and he talks about the fringing or the little bit of, and there's several different ways to approach this. The simplest way is you just take that blur tool and knock it down, and then you won't see it. I'll do one more little spot there, but it didn't really do too bad of a job. Now you can see there's more detail in the tufas now. It's also a little bit brighter than you would think it should be.
So Eric,
Yes.
I happened to watch that video yesterday, and as I recall, he makes it real big
Yeah.
and has you just go to the edge of the inner circle on the edge.
Right. He uses a brush, and I think he's doing it in Lightroom. Is that right?
Yeah, but yeah, I think
And he
it was
uses
a
the-
Lightroom thing.
Yeah, and he uses a brush within a brush, and he goes very close to the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Like I said, there's a few ways to do it. The easiest way is just to use that blur tool. But here's something I discovered when I made these tufas lighter that I did not notice before, is that, look over here, we have a bird. I didn't see the bird before.
Yeah, cool.
And so what I'm going to do is that replace color tool. I'm going to use that again. So I'm going to do image adjustments, replace color, and I'm going to select the bird because he's very blue at the crack of dawn. And I'm going to take the fuzziness. You're not going to be able to see this. They give you a tiny black and white, almost X-ray looking image of what you've selected. And as I move it, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I want to move it till the fuzziness is really low until it only is affecting the white, or excuse me, it's blue in this case, that I selected. Once I've done that, I can change the saturation, number one, down to make it grayish, and then bring the lightness up. And now that's a white gull.
Can you make it an osprey?
Yeah.
They
different-
have osprey. They have osprey there.
That's a different filter, Mercury. I could touch up his beak too, but not really necessary. But now once you move back, then you can see that the gull is there. And this is one that's a little bit brighter. The tufas do start to look a little weird if you get too bright.
They're too blue too, with their bright.
They're too blue in here too.
Yeah,
And we could change that as well. So let's do that for a second. Image adjustments, replace color, and I'm gonna go in here, and you'll be able to see, yeah, see how blue that square is down here? And you can shift that. I can bring the saturation down. How come it's not affecting, oh, sorry. Okay, let's try that again. Replace color. It's very blue. There's a blue square there. I would bring the saturation down and makes it pretty gray. But like Sue was, or like Betty was saying, they're actually almost black. And that doesn't work. Maybe I need more fuzziness. Actually, what I need is a new selection, but I'm going to bring the lightness down. Okay.
Eric,
Yes.
you've changed the overall exposure on the tufas.
Yes.
You instead introduce the effect of the sunlight coming from a specific direction.
Well, what we're going for, and I'm not sure exactly what the judge was trying to say, but I think what they were trying to say was that these tufas, at least during daylight, they're light to light gray, white and sometimes light gray and that sort of thing. I've seen them before. I've seen white ones. I haven't seen black ones, but I've seen definitely gray ones. And I think what the judge was trying to say was that they needed to be brought out more. And we can go back and look where we started.
Or just paint the eastern side of the tufas in light.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Oh, I see, just one side, one edge.
As if they were being lit from a particular direction, namely where the sun is.
Well, I was thinking that almost looks to me like moonlit at sunrise.
Well, it was probably, we walked there in the dark. So it was basically, if you look, the light is coming just to the left of the pillar on the right. So that's where the sun is coming up. And to make the tufa brighter on this side of the sun would be kind of ridiculous because they were totally dark. So I just lightened it enough that you could see some texture, but not enough that it looked like they were front lit, which is kind of what it sounded like the judge wanted.
Or at least side lit maybe. And you could create that side lit kind of look.
Yeah, just drop the light down about half of what you've got.
What do you mean? Say
The
that-
brightness.
Oh,
Drop the brightness of the tufas to about half of what you have.
I don't have them selected anymore. I can go back and select them.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, because you didn't save the
No,
mask.
I
Yeah,
didn't save it as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
selection.
got it.
But what I would do is I would simply do I would dodge the edges of those. And you could even put some amber glow on those edges too. I think that's going to take more time than what we're doing today, but you could simply come back and dodge this edge. I'm just going to draw here where I would dodge it. And then maybe some of these edges. And then add some golden color to it as well. That would take a while and it's not exactly what Betty saw, but it would might make a nice picture, so.
I never spend that much time on my images, anything more than 10 or 15 minutes, that's it. It's all over.
Yeah,
I'm not one to go and spend all that time. Either you got the shot or you didn't, that's my humble opinion.
And that brings us to our next topic, which is AI. And that's the very first thing I was going to talk about in there, in that AI. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing. We can see each other. So I've been reading an exhaustive number of articles. I've been listening to what Matt and other people online are saying about AI. And I'm trying to come up with something that we can create as a guidelines document for the club at some point. And if we like it as a club, we might submit it to PSA or others, see if they want to use it. But if we think about this historically, as soon as Photoshop and Lightroom even existed, as soon as it became in existence, we started using AI. Anything you're doing there, right? Because none of it came out of the camera that way. We're making changes to the image. And so AI began long ago. Photoshop's 25, 26 years old, something like that. And so we've been using it to dodge and burn. We've been using it to lighten, darken, blur, all the little things that we've been using it for all this time have now graduated into what they're calling AI, but it's really been AI this whole time. And that's kind of the premise that I'm starting with, so that we don't have as big a leap to go to get to AI, because everybody thinks it's something new, but it really isn't. And so here's my first question is, and we have 12 of us here. Let's see, you can say yay or nay, but do we think that Topaz or any sharpen and denoise kind of program, is that something that we would allow in the future for our images? And let's just assume for the time being, we're not talking about any of the story categories, nature, travel, journalism. Yeah. So, Chris, do you have a vote?
Yeah, I think it's okay as long as it's operating on your, the image that you captured.
Yes, it always has to, and that's the last thing that I was going to talk about, but of course, it always has to be your image.
So people have been using Topaz in nature for years.
Which you wonder about, or I wonder about, I should say. I almost feel like those story categories, it should have come out of the camera that way, but that's actually old school thinking, and maybe we should be moving along here in our thinking. Do you have a thought, Airdrie?
Well, I don't use Topaz, so I'm not one to talk to Mercury.
Mercury, you're up.
So yeah, you've got my views on it.
Yeah,
The cameras I had didn't have iFocus either. I mean, we're using
yeah,
computers and AI pretty much from the time you pick up a new camera, as far as I'm concerned.
you are.
And honestly, I think Steve Perry, you name your really good photographer, they try and get it always right, but he talks about using denoise and Lightroom, which is pretty much all I've been using for a while now.
Yeah,
And what is a sharp image and what's not. And he'll push it a little bit sometimes if he thinks it's the right image, but it's got to look natural. And to me, that's the bottom line. And when you're editing an image, is especially nature, anything like that, it's got to look like a natural image, like you took it that way. It can't look phony. It can't have sharp edges that look unnatural. It can't look like it was pasted into the image. And then I just think it's good editing.
So I have a couple comments.
go ahead, Jim.
I don't know if you, but probably you don't, most of you shoot Nikon or Sony, but Canon just released their R1 and R5 version 2 specs. And they actually, for instance, they'll do denoise can now be done in the camera.
Yeah.
So you can select a denoise capability. So they're actually moving modifications to images that you can select in the camera before the image comes out.
Kind of pushes the line further, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Can you apply that to a group of images or just to each single image?
Well, either it's like a selection that you'd make, and so you turn it on or turn it off. And so if it's turned on, all the images that you shoot while it's turned on give you
Oh,
denoise.
okay.
There's other things they're doing
All right,
besides that, but the specs are just kind of unwinding.
yeah,
But clearly they're moving a lot more of the image modification into the camera.
yeah,
And it has the eyeball. Canon 15 years ago had eye tracking, and the R1 and the R5 II use eye tracking as well. The other thing, just as a comment, I'm on the N4C board, and they're in the process right now of redoing their image rules, the photo rules for 2025. And AI has come up, and it kind of looks to me like the way this is going is you can make modifications to your print or to your images as long as you're using pixels out of your image. So in other words, the deal is you can't go and retrieve pixels from somewhere else and have them put in there. But if you are expanding your image a little bit by adding a little more to the top or the side, and those pixels come from within your image, that's probably, I think that looks to me, because there's a lot of discussion and it's not totally settled. The new rules aren't going to be approved until the September meeting, but there's all this discussion going on. So it looks like to me that if you use pixels from your image, then you can make modifications or remove things. That's what it looks to me, how this is going. And I'm not strongly opinionated one way or the other. I really just want to know what the rule is, and then I'll follow it, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah.
so
Jim,
because
are they talking about the art categories or the reality categories?
yeah, the pretty much it almost looks to me like the rules on the three strict categories are kind of being tightened a little bit, not much, but maybe a little bit on where you can't darken the corners and things like that. But they're putting some bounds on the, like just the color and the other fine art categories, if you will. Black and white looks like the monochrome looks like it has pretty loose categories as well that you can make quite a few modifications to the images.
So they're going to allow content aware fill, but they're not going to allow you to change a frown to a smile.
Yeah. Well, if you use Liquify,
You're still using the same pixels. That's interesting.
yeah,
You're
That's
using them, but you're moving them.
yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. So there's still, as you know, there's a lot of debate about this, but what I'm seeing is there's more modifications, AI possible type, that are moving into the camera. And so it's going to be pretty hard. You're going to have to rely a lot on people following the rules, if you will, because it's very difficult on some of these AI modifications to tell that they weren't in the original image, right?
Sure, sure.
We've always been on the honor system, and it's hard to get
Yeah,
around.
and actually it's interesting because the camera manufacturers could actually put a flag in the metadata that tells whether or not pixels have been brought in and they're not using pixels that are in the image. Lightroom could maybe do that as well. There's ways to manage this and set flags up over time.
The programmer can hack it.
That, yeah, yeah.
Okay, we were talking about sharpening and noise and that sort of thing. Something that seems to be fairly simple but can be very complex is dodge and burn. And
Mhm.
so dodge and burn can be very simply used just to touch up here and there. And technically, it looks like if you read between the lines in the nature category and other categories, you could do a little dodging and burning there.
Mhm.
But they call it darkening, right?
Yeah.
But you could also take it to the point where you could black it out. And who knows, except for the photographer, that you did that, right?
Right.
So that's going to be a gray area. There's going to be a lot of gray areas within all of this, unfortunately.
That makes you the king, Eric.
Yeah, that's right. Ergie, were you going to say something there?
No,
Oh, okay. You look like you were going to say something. Uh, So Mercury, you had actually a really good image that made a case for the nature category of, there was a stick. He had this great egret shot. I believe it was an egret, and it was moving and it was going in this direction to get a bug or something. But there was a stick like right here, and it would have been relatively easy to clone it out or to darken it or do something to it to make it less obvious. But it was very obvious in the picture, and it pretty much didn't ruin it, but it did make it a lot less attractive. So in that gray,
I think that was an osprey and it was a chicken and nest and the other was a branch in front of its face.
okay.
yeah, but that's never been allowed in nature.
Yeah, and so
That's right.
the stick stayed.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that that's an area where you could have used darkening, let's say, and darken that to make it less obvious. And it's almost at the point of being unacceptable. And really all you're doing is dodging or burning to create that. And so the point being is that we're going to bump heads on a lot of these things. And I mentioned that early on that not tonight, but other times, that this is it's not a line in the sand. It's a moving target that goes up and down and everywhere. And
Eric, along those lines, if I can say, I did an image that I entered that it was two jaguars at the end of mating,
yeah,
and the female spins on the male, and there's like this hairy moment as to like how much revenge is she going to extract or whatever, and he's
right.
kind of like jumping back to defend himself. And we were in a vehicle, we couldn't, and it was all happening immediately, so we couldn't change position regardless. But it was not an attractive surround. It's side of a dirt road, and there's a bunch of little sticks and branches of brush along the side. And in that, I took the liberty. I didn't remove anything, but I didn't want the sticks and branches to be the subject matter,
Right.
And so what I did is I took a brush and I just would soften them in the image.
Mhm.
And to me, that's under the heading of burning and dodging. But and that probably gets into some questionable judgments based on whoever you're talking to. But to me, that's the best way to share that image and tell that story. So I think that's a good example.
Yeah, and I think we're going to run into this time and time again. And I think we should be running into it time and time again. There's going to be extremes. Some of these articles I've been looking at, there are definite, people have been taking it way extreme in one direction or another, especially with video, which seems ridiculous, and I'm not a big video guy anyway, so, but taking it too far is going to happen, and we're going to see it in our club, and trying to decide, what do you do then? Is that something where you tell the person, You can't do that. Do you tell the judge during the judging that, hey, we don't allow that at the club? Or is that Bernie's job before it gets to that point? Since he's the, what's his job?
Sergeant at arms.
Sergeant of
Yeah,
Arms, yeah.
He's a sergeant of arms. So.
Yeah, let's throw it back at Bernie.
So Eric,
Yeah.
I found AP has a scale. I think it goes from 0 to 7. 0 being no modifications and 7 being AI generated picture. So when photographers send pictures into AI, they have to rate their pictures. So a 1 is cleaning dust, and a 2 is maybe providing, you know, some darkening or lightening. So they have a scale that they require their photographers. Have you gone through that or looked at it?
No, that's a good point. I will research that one and pull it in because
Yeah, so
That'd be a good
they
tool to
actually so long term, I mean, I could see if you're gonna turn a print in, you could take their scale and just say and turn in how much modifications you did to it, and then you'd have some way of kind of at least comparing it to other photos in the competition, or setting a limit that say an AP level 3 is the max that you can change
Mhm.
prints.
But that's only for, actually, that doesn't really apply because in monochrome, you could do whatever you want, and the same thing in creative and the same thing in
Yep.
color pictorial. So you'd have to see if we could apply that to the story categories. Yeah.
What does unmodified truly mean? You know, like back in the film days, if we were shooting slides, you know, just our choice of film, Ektachrome versus Velvium makes
Mhm.
a huge difference.
Yeah.
And oh, I didn't modify anything. I just used Velvia to get
Why is it so
saturated colors.
saturated with the Ektachrome? Yeah.
Mm.
But on the other hand, if you go look at Ansel Adams pictures and you go through all of the changes that he made to prints over sometimes 2 or 3 weeks,
Mhm.
I mean, he made major modifications to
Mhm.
prints that are classical,
Yeah.
you know, photos these days. So
And you see, the difference there is that Ansel was evaluating photographs on a totally different scale. He wasn't looking for the winning photograph in a group of photographs. He was looking for, how can I make the most money with this image?
Or how can I make it look the best way that I want it to look? He initially, I have all of
I
his.
didn't mean that as a derogatory
Oh,
remark.
okay. Yeah.
I admire the heck out of Ansel Adams,
Yeah.
but it's a different scale.
Yeah.
You're not competing with people, you're selling photographs.
Right.
So if we evaluate, let's say in the club, we had a category of saleable photograph, then modifications that would be totally against the rules in our current categories could come out on top.
Sure. Well, you see them all the time in
Yeah.
a gallery or something, and some guy's got some blown out sky and some, you're just like going, okay, I know where that came from, So,
Or it doesn't have to be blown out. It could just be a fabulous photograph where you just happen to make changes using tools or AI, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it, AI, that makes it more appealing and people buy it.
the original AI was actually AA, Ansel Adams. I have a whole section that I did on Ansel Adams because I've read through all of his books. And he has a book called The Negative. And in there, he talks about the moonrise over New Mexico, wherever it was, New
Fernandez.
Mexico.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you look at the print that he made from that, it's like miles away. It's impossible. Okay, here's something that's been, if you've been using Lightroom and Photoshop lately, and if you haven't experimented with it, you should, is the removal tool. And in Mercury, in your image where the stick was, all you had to do is paint that stick and it would figure out how to make it go away and make it perfect again.
And I could have entered it in pictorial.
Yes, you could have. But the removal tool, I think, is going to be something that will have some debate, because I've already talked to a couple of people that want to use it on nature photographs, and I've told them they cannot, but
Well,
they
Eric,
really
instead of
would
using the
like to.
remove, instead of using the removal tool to get rid of that stick or that branch, could you use pruning shears?
Yeah,
Printing shears.
Or a quarter stick of dynamite.
yeah. Well, just to add that to your camera bag.
Yeah.
And just sneak up on that bird and say, just hold it right there a second. I'm gonna snip this branch out of the way. Yeah,
It's
That
hard
bird
with
lives
birds.
half
It's
a
easy
mile
to
away
follow.
with your long lens.
right. Okay, I just wanted to kick around a few ideas in that category. Anybody have anything else they want to talk about for AI, just in general? Okay. Well, we've used up our time.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Have you done any video development in Photoshop?
not for about 5 years, but yes, I have done some.
Okay. Just curious. I've shot some video the last couple of weeks. I don't usually shoot video, but I did because of the subjects and stuff. And so I've pulled images out of Lightroom and they came out really good. I was really amazed. But to develop, I can pull images out in Lightroom, but in order to develop the video, I have to do that in Photoshop, and I haven't done that. And I've got a set of instructions that I pulled offline, and it's not a drag and drop exactly. So
No, it's a little clumsy. If you don't have like a a video editing program, that would be my first step, and then do Photoshop second. But you can do that. You don't have Premiere or any of the photo editing, video editing.
well, it appears that in the current version, if you take I don't know, a strip, I don't know what they call it, it's a strip of a scene,
Yeah,
and you go in and you modify one of the film strip
can apply
images, it applies that to the whole
yeah,
set. So,
you can do that. Yeah.
and then you can pull them together and you can apparently move them around so you can change the sequences and that sort of stuff. Okay.
It takes a while.
All right.
All right.
That answers my question.
All right, everybody. Thanks for the evening, and we'll do this again in a month.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Eric.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you, Eric.
thanks, Eric.
All right, take care.
Thank you.